Welcome everyone to the first Oli Blunderbuss. Season 5, Week 1 is in the books. Let's take a look at the action. First game of the season is JC with the white pieces, Katie with the black pieces, and let's get into it. E4, E5, F4, King's Gambit, old school opening, going back a few hundred years. Katie takes the pawn, JC brings the knight out, stopping any queen checks from the side. Katie brings the bishop out to c5, which gets hit immediately by JC's d4 push. Challenges the bishop, forces it to retreat, and then picks up the pawn on f4, putting together a great position where white has control of the center. Katie challenges that center right away, and JC takes up a little bit more space, advancing the pawn. Katie challenges that pawn with f6, and JC develops the bishop out to d3, clearing the path for castling to the queen side. Katie continues to bring pieces out. This has been a great game where both sides are trying to challenge and fight for the center pretty directly. JC takes that pawn, which actually in this particular position helps black more than it helps white, because now black has got that knight into the game. We get a check, and we get the queens coming off early. So the queens don't last long in the very first game, but we have a queenless middle game, so all the pieces are still here except for the queens. c3, defending the center. Katie brings the bishop out, challenging the d3 bishop and forcing some exchanges. And we get a knight trained, and what's kind of interesting about this position is if you go back several moves, you'll see that white had these two pieces out, some pawns in the center, and black had no pieces out except for this bishop over here. And now black has two extra knights in the middle, white has no additional knight or no additional pieces out. So black has done a great job of equalizing and turning the position in their favor. Knight jumps forward, castle, knight comes out, and then the rook comes over to try to put some pressure onto the knight. I would look at bringing this rook over instead, just because now you get that extra rook into the game. You got both your rooks pointed down these open files here, and that should give you some good pressure into the position. The rook comes over, get castling out of the way, very smart, get out of that pin. Knight jumps in, and that gets exchanged off right away, which then kind of leaves black with this weak pawn here. And JC immediately goes after it, and then this is an interesting sequence here. So Katie does a good job challenging the center, bring this pawn out, putting pressure onto the pawn in the middle. JC pushes forward, but this destabilizes the knight. And right here, there's already a tactic into the air where you could bring out forward this pawn here. If they take, you just pick up the knight, or if they come back, take the bishop, exchange, and then you're up the knight. So that was hanging in the air there. When that pawn moved forward, it destabilized the knight here. And so being aware of those kind of tactical opportunities. Bishop comes over, which actually is putting pressure along this diagonal, so trying to take advantage of it. JC takes the pawns, so reinforcing the knight with the rook. This does still leave the same tactics in the air, because you can still pick it up. So it doesn't actually defend against that g5 push. And these pawn moves are kind of hard to see sometimes, but you got to just look for those opportunities where you can hit those pieces and take advantage of. If you see anything like kind of like loose and hanging out there, can you take advantage of that piece? Rook comes over instead, attacking the pawn. Pawn gets defended. Knight jumps forward, trying to find some squares. JC gets the rook's double, which is now putting a lot of pressure onto black's position, and we can see that the advantage is steadily growing. Pawn gets trying to challenge the center, trying to weaken things up, but JC defends it. Attacking the rook here down on the baseline, but the rook moves forward, and we get some exchanges, and then the rook slides over to the side, but JC finds a beautiful move here with this knight c6, attacking basically everything in the position. There's the discovering onto the rook on the back rank. Everything is in trouble here now with this move. Katie picks up the knight, get the exchange on the rooks. JC picks up the rook there, or the knight instead of the rook. There's no problem picking up the rook here and just being up the exchange, but picking up the knight is also completely winning. Rook comes over to try to attack the pawn. Good job getting the rook to the 7th rank. Katie picks up the pawn there, and after a couple more moves, we can see that while the material is almost completely even, there is this one outside 8 pawn, and there's really nothing in the way to stop it from moving up the board. Rooks get traded off. Pawn starts moving up. It's moving for the glory land, and we get this great move from JC here, where the king was attacking the bishop, brought the bishop back, and forces this trade, because black either has to trade the bishop or lose this pawn. You don't want to do that, so you trade off, and now you're into a king and pawn endgame, but this should be one that white holds pretty easily. A great little move there to deflect the king away from the defense of this pawn, and then advances forward, escorts the pawn home, gets the queen, and Katie resigned the game. Game 2 is Ethan with white, Greta with black. We get the king's pawn game again, d4, f5. All right, nice coming out. These are all good moves, bringing pieces out into the game. Defending the center, get some exchanges. Queen comes up, pinning, putting more pressure onto the center of the position, moving the knight out. And we get some exchanges into the middle here. There was one little tiny trick where you could have brought this knight forward and forked everything. But that's a pretty hard move to see, honestly, especially with the knight just taking the pawn. It's natural to want to take. And we get this pawn picked up on c2 there, which is a good move. Bishop comes out. Everything's been pretty high level, I would say, so far. Ignore the bar on the side. Both sides have been playing very logically, bringing pieces out, trying to control the center. This move, unfortunately, will leave white with a weak pawn if they exchange, if the queens get traded off. Knight comes forward, attacking the queen, which basically forces this exchange, and now we have that weak pawn sitting in the center of the board. Immediately goes to attacking it. Rook comes over, attacking the bishop, and Greta finds a great move, bringing the bishop, checking the king here. King moves forward, bishop moves out of the way, moves to safety, attacks the bishop, counterattacking the knight. We get them exchanged off. Rook comes forward, defending this pawn, attacking this pawn. Makes sense. The knight goes forward, grabs the pawn here, and we have the pawn moving forward. Not sure exactly where it's trying to get to, but it works out with the rook getting behind it, attacking this bishop here. Unfortunately, the rook comes up trying to counterattack the rook, but the rook just steps back, picking up the bishop for free. Knight comes forward, trying to confuse the position a little bit, get the king moving out of the way, and the knight checks. King moves forward some more, picking up the pawn. Black's doing as good a job as they can, trying to confuse the position. And then the bishop comes out, takes the pawn, but unfortunately that pawn is defended by the rook, and so the rook recaptures, and we're back down to even pieces with black up an extra pawn. Rook comes over, we get knight check, which is a good move, forcing the king back. We get the exchange. There was a little trick here where you could give another check to the king. The king would have to move somewhere. It's finding those positions similar to the first game where you have a piece that is loosely defended that you can, drive back and take advantage of removing that defender. But we get the exchange, and then the knight comes forward, kind of actually putting the knight in one of the similar situations where this knight could potentially be weak. We get good move, actually. In my mind, this actually does set up a checkmate threat in the back rank there. Good job of seeing that and avoiding the checkmate. Bishop comes back, attacking the knight. The knight moves. Rook attacks the knight again, and the knight moves with check, but unfortunately is just picked up, and there's no taking back because of the pin along the c-file there. Pawn moves forward. Ethan starts bringing the king forward, and this is actually a really great sequence, bringing the king into position. This king is in a lot of trouble right now. The black king doesn't have many squares to go to. Move the pawn. What else can you do? Rook comes over, getting ready for that checkmate threat. trying to defend and stop it, and we get this check here. If the check had gone from the other side, the mate would have been unstoppable. But going this way, unfortunately, allows black a little bit of room to sneak out, and the black king goes running, and the black king has now leapt from one side of the board to the other, and now picks up a pawn, and we're starting to see that the position from the computer's evaluation is looking more drawish, and that's just because if white is just left with the rook and the bishop versus the rook, there shouldn't be any way to win the game. We get a few more moves here, checking, moving back. Here is a great opportunity where you can again deflect the defender away from the defense of the piece, and then this would be an easy king and pawn endgame here to win. Advancing the pawn though does make some sense, trying to move forward, especially with this bishop that's currently pinned. We got check. King moves out of the way. Again, the same tactic is hanging in the air. You could just pick up the bishop and pick up the rook, and that would be an easy win. We get the pawn is now sitting on that 7th rank, keeps trying to move forward. Rook comes down. We get some exchanges, and we are now in a position where black is equalized the pieces, but is now up this pawn. Defends the pawn. King comes forward. King comes down, and pawn pushes forward. There's a little trick here. Again, you can drive the king back and then take the pawn. So finding these moves where you can just get that little extra space to remove that defender from the piece that you would like to pick up. Pawn goes forward, pinning the pawn, defending, and then we get an exchange. And then there is a strategy in these positions where you have one pawn, especially a pawn like say right here where your king is ideally placed right in front of it and you're going against this rook. If you bring the rook back along the 7th rank, there's no way for black to get a check along here, and there's no way to move this king off of this position, and therefore the pawn cannot ever move forward, no matter what black does. Black moves along, you just move the rook back and forth, just back and forth. There is no way. King can't cross this line and enter the position at all. If black tries to trade everything off, you just run forward, you'll pick up the pawn. If you try to bring the rook around, it still doesn't matter because there's no way to get into the position. So this is one of those ways where you can kind of force, and then actually even here you could actually, I think, just force the whole endgame to be drawn at this point, where you check the king and move, pick it up, and draw. So, but moving the king over unfortunately allows, and Greta does a great job, finds the king move that advances into the position, pawn moves forward, pawn's moving down, rook comes over to try to stop the pawn, and then a great check here to force the king back. Similar to all those other tactics that we saw, picks up the rook, and clean ladder mate all the way through to the end. Good job with the checkmate. Game 3, we have a great battle between Emily and Tyler. Emily with white, Tyler with black. E4, D6. Tyler plays a system I'm pretty sure Roger plays all the time at high 5. Bishop comes out, bishop gets hit. So far, I would say white's doing nothing wrong. All the pieces are coming out. Castle king. Position looks pretty stable. Challenges the pawn. And instead of going to the corner, you might want to think about bringing the knight over to this side. Even though it might look like this is a challenge, you have so much ways to take advantage of the open file yourself, and there's no way for black to actually take advantage of this position. So this is one of those situations where the double pawn probably would not be that bad for you. But no problem. Move the knight to safety, brought the bishop out. Get some exchanges in the middle, challenging that pawn. This pawn here, this pawn push added a defender to the pawn back here. So that's the logic behind it, but it does weaken that pawn, and good job from Emily to pick up the pawn that was hanging in the position. And we get the knight capture. The pawn capture is recommended in this position. As we'll see, there's a bad fork coming in the middle here. Nothing you can do. This is one of the situations where you might want to think about either moving or finding some other move in the position. You could bring the queen out, putting pressure along here. Taking just helps black get their queen into the center and able to put more pressure onto the position. Tyler picks up the pawn, not necessarily the best pawn to pick up. Emily is able to turn this around a little bit with some good playing. We can start to see that already. The computer does not mind white being down the piece in this position. Queen comes over to give a check. King moves out of the way, and this is to avoid the fork that is looming on this square here. So trying to find some way to get out of that fork. Pawn's still hanging though, so white picks up a pawn, comes back, attacks the rook. You know, you could always think about, well, or do you want to, if you're down a piece, do you want to just go for the trade? White is better here, but sometimes in those positions where you're facing a strong opponent and you are down material, it is an option that's in the position. But this is also good. Bringing a knight, starting to eye this f5 square. Knight gets kicked back. You do, again, have that opportunity to continue to go forward into the position and put more pressure onto black. But nothing wrong with retreating. And the knight comes forward again, attacking the bishop here. And yeah, so instead of taking right away, this is similar to the theme that we've been seeing, is like, can you remove the one defender? This piece is only defended by the queen. Queen can get attacked by almost anything and be forced to move. So you can bring the rook over. If the queen goes back, you can hit it with the pawn. Queen goes forward. You hit it with the rook again. And now that queen has to move somewhere else, and then you have that rook or that bishop hanging, and you can pick it up for free. So those are just some possible lines that might happen if you bring that rook and just start harassing this queen and just see where is it going to go, because it might have to leave the defense of that piece there. Get the exchange, check, and knight comes in, threatening a pretty big fork, so good move. Tyler defends against it, and then the pawn goes forward, and this unfortunately forces the black to make a good move, which attacks this pawn, threatens a fork of their own. Down here, pawn goes forward, and unfortunately, once the dust starts to clear, we start to see that there's not much hope. Few checks, and Tyler is able to save the position and take the game. But back here, you know, back in this middle game, there was a lot of opportunity for white to construct an attack against this black king. These pieces are completely out of play. So, you know, just any time that you could find an opportunity to just harass this queen, make it move, you know, bring pieces in, bring pieces forward, could have changed the game and changed the result of this game. The final game we're going to look at is between Derek with the white pieces and Max with the black pieces. We get the Sicilian, and we get early queen coming out. Queen gets attacked, retreats, challenging the center with d5. I kind of like the systems with playing d6 to just kind of hold things back, but nothing wrong with just challenging the center right away, and anytime you can get this move in, it's usually a good idea. White comes out with the bishop. We get the queen attacked, queen slides over, reinforcing the pawn, and attacking the pawn. All these moves have been pretty logical so far by both players. Defending the knight, You could also look at just defending the pawn directly. Defends or breaks the pin for the knight. Bishop comes out and challenging the bishop, and we get this bishop sliding back here, which unfortunately, and Max takes advantage of this, leaves the bishop hanging. But that is not all. This game is wild. It's gonna go places. We get a bishop sacrifice. King comes forward. Bishop gets hit, and then counterattacking the queen. Not sure exactly what's wrong with just bringing the bishop back and holding on to the position, but we're going for maximum forward pressure here, and the knight comes forward to attack the queen, which immediately gets forked by the queen attacking the king, and then also allowing this knight to put pressure, trying to challenge the queen by blocking with the bishop, and white does a good job here of taking the pawn here, or taking the bishop with the fork of the king and the queen, or the king and the bishop. And we get this move with the king stepping out of the way. The move to keep an eye on would be to just take the knight. You are still threatening the queen here. If the queen, comes and captures something, you can move back, and then at this point, black would be up too much material. Stepping forward though allows the queen to come in, and now white is in control. Good job of not doing any of the other moves that lead directly to checkmate. Queen move is the only move here. Queen moves back. This is a move that I would not necessarily see right away, so great job finding this move where you're retreating the queen back, covering this pawn, attacking the knight, and then also you can swing along this way and put pressure onto this king. Defending the knight, attacking the knight, and now counterattacking the knight over here. This does have an unfortunate sequence where you can actually force a beautiful little checkmate here with the king getting drawn forward. But the knight goes back, which is the logical move. Your knight's attacked. You're trying to hold on to it, especially when you're down material. That knight retreats. Another knight comes into the position, and good job castling the king, getting it over and castling long as well. You're now setting it up that these rooks could come over and participate in the attack on the black king here. And this move, I'm not sure, leaving open this square for the knight is pretty risky. It's not really. This pawn isn't necessarily the best defender of this square because of all the pressure that's over here, but moving it forward doesn't actually hold on to anything in black's position. And as we'll see, knight comes forward, takes advantage immediately of that square being there. King comes forward, moving the pawn, and then kind of a situation of maybe not reading the room. This is one of those situations where you're under a lot of pressure right here, and taking this pawn is just opening this file for the white rooks, and those rooks would be looking pretty deadly to me. Unfortunately, white misses a great opportunity. Moving the knight to any other square, you now are targeting this square pretty heavily with all these pieces. The queen can still come into, oops, not that way. Queens don't move that way. Move into e6 here. You have the checks in here. This would be a very, very dangerous situation. Or even just bringing a rook over and just asking the black queen, where are you going to go? There's not many squares available to it. But taking that way, unfortunately, it brings this knight into the defense. And so when the check comes in, this is a tricky situation here. Defending with, thought either knight would be okay, but well, either knight is okay. This is the preferred knight to defend with, where you just reinforce everything, block all the checks, and then you can start to take advantage of your extra material. Bring the queen back. We see a similar tactic, or a fork tactic available in the position. This one kind of shows up a lot. Anytime there's a knight near a king, there's a lot of times where you can lure a piece into a square where there'd be a fork. Unfortunately, we get the trade right away. pieces start coming off, and then at this point, black is in control of the position. The two knights should take advantage or be able to handle anything that the rooks can throw at them, especially with the extra rook, if this rook can ever make an appearance into the game. This is a great little tactic here, taking advantage of the pin here, so good job to Derek for noticing all these little tricks and pins that were hanging in the position, advancing the pawn forward, and good job. The rook has now joined the game here. Unfortunately, this is not a pin. The knight can just jump out of the way, and we get some exchanges, and at this point it's pretty straightforward for black to use that extra material, advance the pawn down the board, get to queen, and force a nice checkmate. Thanks for watching the week 1 recap. Those were just 4 of the 62 games that were played this week. There'll be a link in the Discord for all the games that were played last week if you want to go check out anybody else's games that are inside there. And I do have like a little bit of extra analysis that I've been putting together as I reviewed these games before recording this. We'll keep working on the production for this as we get through the season, and looking forward to making the show better and better. So thank you all, and see you in week 2.